A hidden threat, the dark secret behind the socialite's sudden disappearance. That line could have been a headline, an accusation, a plea. Instead, it became the most literal summation of a case that refused to settle into any neat explanation. A woman walked into her own house and, as every camera on the property recorded, simply was no longer there. Siena Valmont was the kind of person whose silhouette belonged on magazine covers and on the front rows of charity galas. Wealth dressed her with ease, manners made her unassailable. Yet the house she called home, a brooding mansion of marble halls and high, echoing windows, kept its own ledger of small disturbances. Lights would flicker in rooms she hadn't used. Portraits seemed to face slightly away when guests arrived. Over time, Siena's public calendar thinned while private doors stayed shut longer. Her smile remained the same for cameras. Her footsteps, when they came down the corridor, sometimes sounded like someone else's had been walking ahead. If you follow this kind of story, stay with it now. If you want more mysteries explored in the same slow, careful way, subscribe. Quietly, if you like. This is not a spectacle. It is an attempt to collect the facts that keep pointing toward an absence that looks like intention. On paper, Siena's life was an image of success, benefactors, soirees, interviews. She presided over gatherings with curated grace, the sort of hostess who could make a crowded room feel exclusive and a headline feel inevitable. Friends described a precise, organized mind and a fondness for ritual. The same dessert, the same wine, the same arrangement of lilies that never quite wilted. But behind that ritual was an increasing precision that felt less like comfort and more like containment. Staff noticed canceled events, then canceled dinners, then a reluctance to entertain at all. The mansion's geometry, its long corridors, shuttered wings, and a central stair that split the house into two precise halves, lent itself to silence. Silence in a place built to be seen felt almost offensive, a presence in its own right. Staff recollections are sparse and voiced in the low, careful register of people who still, months later, adjust their speech around the memory. A housekeeper later said she found lights on in the east wing at dawn, though notes in the log showed no one had been assigned there. A chauffeur remembered Siena pausing on the steps one night, looking back as if she had felt the press of eyes against her back. He told investigators, "She stood very still, like someone calling her name behind glass." Another staff member said she would sometimes hear movement in rooms that had been locked for years, a slow, familiar shuffling, like the settling of things that had learned to live without being touched. The artifacts of the mystery accumulate into a texture rather than a tidy list. There is the journal, a narrow leather-bound book Siena kept hidden in a drawer of her nightstand. Its handwriting is neat, elegant, and occasionally shivered with sudden breaks. Entries are brief, elliptical. "It watches," one line reads. "It waits." Another, sharper. "It knows when I see it." At the very back, scrawled in a hand that looks like someone suddenly afraid of being seen, she wrote, "It was already here before me." Those phrases lay bare an anxiety that never formed into a complaint. They are not pleas, they are observations, notes taken by someone cataloging the approach of a thing she could not name. Security footage provides a different kind of document, images that resist narrative but demand interpretation. Cameras recorded Siena returning from a small dinner on the night she vanished. The rain had made the drive slick, the mansion's stone bathed in reflected streetlight. The footage shows her umbrella folding shut, her hand on the front door, and then, a beat that the file marks as ordinary, the door closing behind her. On playback, there is a curious irregularity. Frames where a slim, shadowed figure appears behind her for a moment, and then, when reviewed, does not exist between the surrounding frames. In one sequence, a long shadow stretches across the marble, as if someone tall had passed the hallway. When technicians slowed the footage to a crawl, that shadow seems to linger at the edge of the frame, then vanish like a cut in the film. Staff who viewed the video said the silhouette looked like a human outline, but moved with a stillness that did not read as natural. There is no recorded exit. There is no recorded struggle. There is only a gap, and then the house as it always was, empty and echoing. The night itself reads like a scene composed of ordinary details that together refuse ordinary explanation. There was a storm, low and insistent, rain drumming on the broad eaves. Siena had been distant throughout dinner, her conversation clipped, her hands habitually smoothing the hem of her sleeve as though she might fold the feeling of the night away. She arrived home, the driver later recalled, and lingered at the threshold, one hand still on the doorframe. In the footage, she looks over her shoulder, not at the camera or at anyone visible, but as if answering a presence the lenses could not catch. She crossed the marble hall, removed her shoes, one left by the staircase, the other on the landing, used the front table to set down her purse and placed her phone on the bed. The next morning, those things were found where she had left them, a single shoe on the stairs, a purse half open on the foyer table, a cracked phone on the bed. The front door stood slightly ajar, a small, almost polite gap that let in the damp air and the faint smell of rain on stone. Investigations followed the night in the predictable public rhythm, reporters hunting for motive, whispers about staged departures, and lists of potential suspects compiled in the rooms that like to feel in control. Media speculation ranged from planned disappearance to foul play. Social columnists wrote about retreat from the spotlight. Pundits suggested personal crisis. That commentary was loud, and it had the clear advantage of being simple. The mansion's history refused simplicity. When archivists began to trace ownership records, a pattern emerged that turned speculation cold. Previous occupants had left abruptly. A woman who had lived there a century earlier left behind a notebook with phrases that echoed Siena's own. It does not chase. It waits until you understand it is already with you. The language was not identical, but the cadence was. The house's paperwork showed transfers that were sudden, abrupt departures with no selling fanfare, as though a choice had been made on behalf of the owner. This accumulation, journal entries, staff testimony, archival echoes, footage anomalies, creates tension between two frames of explanation. One hypothesis is human and procedural. Siena staged her exit, fleeing some private danger or choosing to vanish in order to escape the public life she once curated. Evidence cited for this includes the deliberate placement of personal items and the absence of forced entry. A staged disappearance could account for the careful leaving of shoes and purse. Against it stands the footage gaps and the lack of any credible exit route recorded by the property cameras. If she intended to disappear, where was the exit caught on film? If she planned to leave, why leave her phone cracked on the bed? A second theory reads the case as abduction. Someone exploited a gap, a moment of distraction, and took her. This fits the suddenness and the undisturbed scene. The cons are blunt: no sign of a struggle, no CCTV evidence of an intruder entering or exiting, and no ransom or communication afterwards. An intruder who left no trace becomes a different kind of absence, a cleverness that does not explain the echoes in the journals. A third possibility is psychological. Siena's notes, the withdrawal, the repeated phrases, the slow closing of the house to guests, all might suggest a mind under siege, retreating into metaphor. The language in her journal could mark a person interpreting internal anxiety as an external watcher. The pros: personal instability can manifest as disappearance, intentional or accidental. The cons: mental explanations often fit neatly into a pattern the mind prefers. They risk reducing real material oddities to symptoms and ignore evidence that resists diagnosis. A fourth theory is the uneasy one: that the mansion itself harbors something that operates outside ordinary logic. The pros here are the archival parallels, the staff reports of presence after occupants left, and the footage anomalies that show silhouettes where there ought to be none. The cons are equally forceful. It is an explanation that admits to no mechanism, no witness who can testify to the thing in any way that holds up beyond anecdote. To propose it as fact would be to replace one mystery with an assertion that cannot be tested. Each theory presses against the others until something like desperation appears. The need to explain erodes the caution that the case demands. There are two smaller hypotheses: a hidden inhabitant, someone who knew the house's geography and used it; a staged tableau arranged by someone close to Siena, relying on public assumptions. Each is plausible to a point and unprovable at another. The house endures these possibilities with a quiet that feels attentive. Its marble floors keep the small sounds perfectly clear. A dropped coin would echo like a dismissed thought. On some nights, staff reported hearing footsteps in corridors where no one walked. Neighbors spoke of lights left on in rooms long after occupants had closed themselves away. In archives, the previous owner's notebook sits like a folded map of dread. It does not chase. It waits until you understand it is already with you. The similarity to Siena's final line, "It was already here before me," is unnerving, not because it proves anything supernatural, but because it suggests a persistence of pattern. A house can be a collection of rooms. It can also be a setting where behavior repeats until the people who live there begin to resemble the pattern itself. We can list facts that hold firm. Siena Valmont returned home on a stormy night. Cameras recorded her entering. On playback, there are anomalies and a silhouette that will not consistently appear. Her personal effects were found in place the next morning. The front door was ajar. Staff remember sounds and pauses that seemed like presences. The archives show that the mansion's history includes abrupt departures and notes that echo the language Siena used. What we cannot do, and must not do, is translate those facts into certainty about forces beyond the evidence, or declare a specific forensic outcome that the record does not support. So we are left with tension, a hidden threat that required no force, a darkness patient enough to wait until it needed nothing more than to be acknowledged. Was it a human plan, carefully executed? Was it an intimate, private decision on Siena's part? Was it a psychological unraveling given form in notes and shadow? Or was it something that lives inside old houses and the memories in their walls? A persistence that can be felt but not measured. There is no tidy answer. The house keeps its ledger. The journal keeps its laconic entries. The footage keeps its gaps. Siena's life keeps its public image intact, and its private silence unexplained. The last page of the notebook holds the same quiet observation that has shadowed so many who lived within those walls, the sense that the danger was always, not outside, but beside them. Not a pursuing hand, but a patient thing that only needed time. What do you think? Leave your theory below. The most compelling ideas often come from people who notice different textures in the same facts. If you want more unresolved mysteries told with care, like and subscribe. We'll keep looking and keep listening.